is the demonstration for the shading techniques project. First I'm going to show you what materials you need and how to fold your paper to split it into quadrants. So you'll need just a regular number 2 HB pencil and a big eraser. And then you're going to have your 12 by 18 thin drawing paper, and you'll have an object set out in front of you that you are going to draw. So first thing, you're going to fold your paper in half, like hamburger style. You want to make sure those corners are lined up really well so you don't get crooked lines. And then I'm going to hold this down, take my finger, slide it to the folded section, and then I can meet my other hand back to the folded section, and then slide my finger down the fold and up the fold. Okay? So when you open it up, you should have 4 equal quarters or quadrants. And then from here you can go ahead and just start drawing your object from placing it in front of you and drawing what you see. You want to make sure that the object stays in the same position and that you are looking at the object from the same position every time. What you can also do is start blocking out areas that are going to be really dark shadows. So right here I saw that it's going to be a really dark shadow, right in here, deep in like the nose, and then right here there's a little bit of a shadow that I can kind of outline right here. And then same thing with the groove right here. There's no big edges necessarily in the face, but there's a good area of shadow that I need to remember to add in there. Alright, so your picture should be pretty well centered on the fold. So the center of my fold is right here. Mine is a little too far to the right, but try your best to get it centered on that fold so each quarter has a pretty equal amount of shading to do with each technique. So the next step to the shading technique project is to actually start shading. So at the beginning, we folded our paper into 4 quadrants or 4 quarters. So my drawing of my skull is divided up into 4s. What you'll need for this part of the project are your 6 shading pencils. So you should have a 2H pencil, an HB pencil, B, 2B, 4B, and 6B. So that goes from lightest to darkest. And remember, you should have watched that video of different types of shading techniques and have actually practiced that in your sketchbook. You should have also have practiced a value scale in your sketchbook as well before starting on your actual project. So you should have your object in front of you. I have my skull in front of me. I believe you might be able to see it just a tad in the video there. You want to have it at the same angle as you did before, and you should be looking at it from the same point of view. So you shouldn't be leaning all the way to the left to look at it from a different point of view today. So I'm going to go ahead and label what each of my 4 techniques are going to be. So in my bottom right, I'm going to do crosshatch. In my top right, I'm going to do tonal shading. In my bottom left, I'm going to do smudging. And then my top left, I'm going to do Scumbling or Circulism. Remember, there are 2 more techniques that you are welcome to use. You can use hatch and stippling. So hatching and stippling are your 2 other options other than the 4 that I'm going to do today. So most of this video is going to be pretty sped up, but I just want to show you what it'll kind of look like in each of the 4 quadrants and what it'll look like when you kind of meet in that middle at those lines. If you would like to draw on these lines to separate them out, you can, and that is up to you. So remember, with the tonal, you're going to be using different types of pencils and laying them down next to each other based on whether they are dark pencils or if they are light pencils. Okay, so this quarter is the tonal shading. Obviously I messed up a little bit there, I just erased it, and I cleaned up any of those edges just with my small eraser on the back of my pencil, cleaning up all of those edges so that I'm ready to move into the next quarter or quadrant, which I'm going to do cross hatching in this one. And with this one, with cross hatching, you don't have to switch back and forth between a bunch of different pencils. You can if you would like to. I'm going to start with 4B. I might change to a 2B if it ends up being too dark, but we'll see how a 4B pencil does. So it ended up in the lighter areas, my 4B pencil was a little too dark, so I'm switching over to my 2B for some of those lighter areas, like around the nose, where it's kind of raised by the eye socket, where it's lighter there. So I'm just switching to my lighter 2B pencil when in those lighter areas. Still doing that cross-hatching method. Alright, and that is the quadrant with cross-hatching. Right here it's really quite light, so I'm just going to go back in with my 2B pencil and just do a couple little hatches to kind of show that curve, just so it's not super harsh. But in this section right here, the bone is really light, super bright, just like was up here, so I'm going to leave that kind of blank. And then this right here is the hole going through the skull, so I'm not going to shade that either. So my next section is smudging, and then my last one would be scumbling and circulism. And then this quadrant right here with smudging, you're more relying on moving the shade of that pencil with your finger rather than the actual type of pencil like you were in the tonal section. So with this one, you'll actually be using your finger to shade and smudge it around, where this one, there was no smudging being done. You can see all those kind of rough lines still in the tonal shading. Alright, and then after you finish your third quadrant, you're going to go and work on your fourth one, and then you'll be done with this project. So you'll have 4 different techniques of shading. Make sure that you have labeled all 4 of them, and at the intersection between 2 quadrants, that you don't cross over them. You want to have them line up right in between those 2 sections. Alright, so the last one I'm going to do is scumbling and circulism, kind of the same thing. Remember that you could do one of your quadrants with stippling, and you could do one of your quadrants with regular hatching. It's up to you which 4 you choose. Alright, so at the end you should have 4 different shading techniques. They should all be labeled. They should all stop right at that fold line. If you would like to add lines to separate them, you can, but you don't have to. And in each quadrant you should see a nice full range of values from really darks to really lights and everything in between. And you may have noticed that when I started shading in each quadrant, I like to start where it's darkest, right here, and then kind of work my way up to the lighter areas. And then in some areas, like with these 3 techniques, it's easy to erase away a certain spot, especially with these 2. You can erase an area, blend it back in, or erase an area and go back over it lightly if you need to bring in those highlights again or those bright spots. With the circulism technique, that's going to be harder to do because if you erase it, then you have this weird difference between what you erase and what you've scribbled on there. But just keep that in mind. You don't have to shade the exact same way that I did, starting with the darkest areas first. I just find that most helpful. And remember, you have 6 different techniques to pick from. You don't have to pick the 4 that I chose.